open borders, shameful abandonment, disregard for human life, the prospect of more mandates and lockdowns, and the list goes on. Now more than ever, we need to stick together. Voting alone is not enough. We must use our dollars to support like-minded companies that fight for our rights and beliefs. Patriot Mobile is America's only Christian conservative wireless provider who shares your values. Last year, we gave more than $500,000 to conservative causes. With your support, we'll give more than $1.5 million this year. It's time to band together and support companies that truly love America and fight for our freedoms. Will you join us?
State and local issues with Tom Fallbush, Bob Scott, and Jim Waters.
Good morning. Welcome to Kentucky's Voice. I'm your special host, Dr. Lance Pearson, with the Kentucky Liberty Caucus as well as the Louisville Tea Party. We are a conservative Christian talk show in the Louisville area. We cover local politics, Kentucky politics, and where applicable, occasionally we'll get into some national level stuff or even international. So stick around for this hour if you want to listen and find out about what's happening in your city as it relates to conservative news and opinion about political topics especially. Let me go ahead and give you the information on how you can connect with us on different avenues of media. So if you would like to watch a version of this show rather than listening to it, I assume most of our audience is listening right now on WGTK 970 AM in the Louisville area. That includes the Collar counties and some of southern Indiana. I know we have some coverage there. If you want to watch this, we have a live stream right now on Facebook as well as on YouTube. You want to go to Kentucky's Voice, that channel on either Facebook or on YouTube, and you'll be able to watch a live stream. If you click on that live tab on YouTube, you'll be able to see full shows from the past. For example, last week I had a show on 629. We're actually going to be piggybacking on some of the coverage that we had of flock cameras there. On the second half of our show, we're going to be discussing similar issues and, the emerging surveillance state and, what happens beyond flock cameras. We also will have a rebroadcast of this show on WBNA. If you have Spectrum TV as your cable provider, you can go to channel 21 at either 12:30, 4, or 7 p.m. tonight and watch a rebroadcast of this. We also want to mention that we are a listener-supported show. If you are interested in having conservative thought and opinion, basically winning for conservative ideology in the marketplace of ideas, we hope you'll support the show. One way that you can do that is by going to kyvoice.org. That's kyvoice.org in your browser. There will be a button in the upper right-hand corner that says donate, and you can set up either monthly donations or even just a one-time donation. All of those different avenues of getting our opinion show, our news and opinion show on media that costs money, and so we would greatly appreciate your support. If you also have another option of supporting us. You can go to our text line and text the word give to 502-571-0970, and a link will be sent to your phone, so you can just click on that and it will take you to that website that I mentioned earlier, kyvoice.org. So let me repeat that text line, 502-571-0970. We would love to have you text in, try to participate in the show. I'm not great about integrating those into the show, but I do read all of those messages, and I'll do my best. If I can work some comments in, I'll do my best. So we do appreciate your thoughts and comments. And again, I will read them even if I'm not able to integrate it into the show. Okay, today's show, we're going to be covering a variety of topics. First, I want to just talk a little bit about the 4th of July. Obviously, great weekend, a great holiday. I spent it with friends and family. I hope you were able to do the same and enjoy some of the fireworks. The first segment of our show that's going to come up right after the break, we're going to talk about a little bit of the background of the 4th of July, the Declaration of Independence, the Revolutionary War. Just talk about some of those history facts and events that rarely get discussed as people are enjoying their hot dogs and hamburgers. It's important to realize where this holiday came from and the history of our country. So I will spend just a little time in that first segment talking about some of the facts that most people didn't learn when they were in high school, even if they remember it. So we'll talk about some of that after the break. At a little bit later in the show, I will be joined by a special guest. His name is Casey Allen. He runs a podcast called The Casey Allen Show. We will talk over issues related to Gen Z, and he's passionate about Fourth Amendment rights as much as I am, and we'll talk about the encroachment on your Fourth Amendment rights by the surveillance state. Join us after the break, Kentucky's Voice.
kyvoice.org.
All right, welcome back to Kentucky's Voice. I'm your special host, Dr. Lance Pearson, with the Kentucky Liberty Caucus as well as the Louisville Tea Party. Today we're going to be discussing a lot of different topics. I first want to just go ahead and broach some of the history of the 4th of July. We just came out of the 4th of July weekend. This was the 250th birthday of that Declaration of Independence. Some people track it back to that 1776 July 4th signing of the Declaration of Independence as the start of the country. I often will go to 1787, the signing of the Constitution. Anyway, in any event, whichever date you track the start of the country, we've been around for quite a while, and I think this is the greatest country on earth. I think most of our listeners will agree. We'll talk about some of the limitations, however. We need to continue working to improve our country if we want to continue to be the best. All right. So let me just talk a little bit about some background on the Revolutionary War and the Declaration of Independence. A lot of people got the basics when they were in high school, but they didn't really dig deeper and probably haven't heard about it. You know, I know people are busy over the July 4th weekend. So let me just talk a little bit about that. First, most people have seen a picture of the Declaration of Independence. I think there are 26 original copies of the Declaration of Independence. Maybe you've seen one in the National Archives. I know that's where I saw the version that I saw. I believe Louisville, at least recently, was home to one of those that was on display. The most prominent signature that's on that is John Hancock. There were actually 56 people that signed the Declaration of Independence. It was adopted on July 4th, 1776, although most of those people actually didn't sign the document on that day. They signed over the next month. So all those names are legitimate. They all supported the cause, and they all were in support of that Declaration of Independence. But it was adopted on that date. Not all those signatures appeared on that date. Now, what happened to those 56 people? This was essentially a declaration of war. This was the arguably one of the most famous Dear John letters. This is, we're breaking up with you, the United Kingdom, England, and we want to go our own way, and it's you, not us, is basically what the message of the Declaration of Independence was. So those 56 people, basically, what happened to them? You announced that you were going to try to go your own way, start your own country, and break off from the most powerful country in the world at that time. There's a famous saying that the sun never sets on the English Empire, and at that time that was true. You basically had English colonies all over the globe, from India to the Americas. And so at some point, the sun was shining on some part of the English Empire at that time. Of those 56 people, what happened over the intervening 11 years before we actually got to a constitution? Well, 17 people lost everything that they owned. Of those 56, 17, so about a quarter of those people lost everything they owned. The reasons for that were mostly British raids, seizure of assets, or the cost that they put into the war effort. Ultimately, wars are very expensive, and they had to be financed by a lot of those people that signed the Declaration of Independence. 12 people had houses or major possessions burned to the ground during that Revolutionary War. So ransacked their houses, pillaged them, damaged them beyond all recognition, or literally burned them all the way to the ground. 9 of the signers of the Declaration of Independence actually died during the ensuing Revolutionary War. I think there are some of those people actually died of non-war wounds. They had an illness during the war. Arguably, that was partially because of the war. Obviously, most of the medical staff was dedicated to the war effort, so they probably didn't get the treatment that they otherwise would have. But 9 people died during the war. 5 of those people that signed the Declaration of Independence were captured. 3 of those were Carolinians. So Thomas Hayward, Arthur Middleton, and Edward Rutledge, 3 Carolinians were captured, as well as Richard Stockton from New Jersey and George Walton from Georgia. They were held as prisoners of war. They were not summarily executed. So the British did not, just because you signed the Declaration of Independence, it wasn't a death warrant. They just captured them and held them as prisoners of war. In fact, all 5 of those people survived captivity until the end of the Revolutionary War and then were freed. The most interesting stat, actually, about that Declaration of Independence and the Revolutionary War is that none of the people who signed the Declaration of Independence at any point defected. You would think some people would get some second thoughts, especially when the war wasn't going so well through the middle, after Valley Forge, for example, where a massive part of the Continental Army died from starvation and hypothermia. Ultimately, none of the people that signed the Declaration of Independence actually deserted the cause and said, we made a mistake and we want to go back with England. So interesting. Now, who are these people? The age of the people who signed the Declaration of Independence ranged from 26. 2 of those South Carolinians that got captured were the youngest. They were 26 years old when they signed the Declaration of Independence. The oldest, you've probably heard of this guy, was Ben Franklin. The average age was around 44. So overall, generally a young lot. Ultimately, the 2 most important voices, the 2 most important people on the American side during the American Revolution were George Washington, obviously commander of the Continental Armies, but also Ben Franklin. And so Ben Franklin was the primary voice as an ambassador to Europe during the Revolutionary War. The Americans almost certainly would not have won the Revolutionary War without the support, in particular, of France. And Benjamin Franklin was a well-known scientist and diplomat. He was a publisher of newspapers. He was world-renowned at the time, and the fact that he was over in Europe, conversing with the French and making sure that they eventually would support the war effort, ultimately at their peril, was crucial to the Americans winning. The French were hesitant to get into it because they didn't love the precedent that it set, having a colonial empire go against the king and the motherland, and ultimately the French Revolution followed right on the heels of the American Revolution, and that French aristocracy were summarily executed, a lot of them, placed in the guillotines. So it ultimately did perhaps backfire on them in terms of their personage, but I think most people would regard it as beneficial for the world as a whole. Now, what were the professions? A lot of people have a lot of slander for lawyers, but 23 of the 56 signers of the Declaration of Independence were actually lawyers. So just a little bit south of half, 41%. 12 people were merchants. 12 people were plantation owners. So this was, many of the people that were prominent members of society were plantation owners in the South when they signed the Declaration of Independence. And so ultimately, this declaration was not especially, ultimately, the Revolutionary War wasn't especially about slavery, certainly not as much as the Civil War was. There were 4 doctors or physicians, 3 farmers, a minister, and then Ben Franklin was a little bit of everything. He was most known at the time for doing Poor Richard's Almanac and being a printer in Philadelphia, basically a newspaper man, but he also was an inventor, a teacher. So Benjamin Franklin was the most well-known of the people that actually signed that Declaration of Independence. Interesting fact, not all of the people who signed the Declaration of Independence were actually born in the American colonies. I believe it's somewhere around 48 of them were. 8 of them were born either in England or in other places, including, anyway. Okay. About 1/3 of the people who signed the Declaration of Independence had military roles either at the time of the signing or afterward as part of the Continental Armies. 17, in fact, ultimately did have active roles in the Continental Armies and were part of the war effort. Let's see. This is another crazy stat. John Adams and Thomas Jefferson actually both died on the 50th anniversary of the adoption of the Declaration of Independence. Thomas Jefferson, most famously, was the person who actually penned the Declaration of Independence. He wrote a lot of it, and it was his hand that actually provided the script, I believe, for the Declaration of Independence. He and John Adams, our second president, they both died on the same day, July 4th in 1826, 50 years to the date from the adoption of the Declaration of Independence. Now, these were elites in society at the time. They were also prominent members of the eventual government, but notably, only 6 of the people who signed the Declaration also signed the Constitution of the United States. Now, the signing of the Constitution of the United States was more a formality. It was a PR stunt more than anything. Arguably, the Declaration of Independence was a PR stunt. It was an official document, but it was meant to rally the cause for a war, if that was necessary to separate from England. The Constitution didn't require the signature of all these people, but the people that signed the Constitution did so because they were prominent members of their community, and they wanted to present a united front that all of the people who were in the Constitutional Convention were in fact in favor of this Constitution. So, in effect, all the states, it was a message to their own states that they should support the findings for the constitutional amendment, and those states should adopt it. And ultimately, all of them did. Okay, so I'd say the general theme for the people that signed the Declaration of Independence and kicked off the Revolutionary War, they were all elites in society. So most of them were quite wealthy, but they were at least prominent members of society. But they had a variety of backgrounds. Some of them were extremely wealthy, like Thomas Jefferson. Some of them were, middle of the pack merchants. But all of them faced enormous risks. That's the final line. So that's the final line. They ultimately risked their reputation and their treasure as well as their lives, and we thank them for their efforts. Join us after the break.
back to Kentucky's Voice Radio online at kyvoice.org.
Welcome back to Kentucky's Voice. I'm your special host, Dr. Lance Pearson with the Kentucky Liberty Caucus as well as the Louisville Tea Party. I want to remind our listeners they can text into our text line at 502-571-0970. I'll do my best to integrate those into the show, but I will read those. I will say that, whether I get it on the show or not. So we always encourage our audience to participate. Again, you're probably listening to us on 970 AM WGTK in the Louisville and Collier County areas. If not, you're on our live stream on YouTube or Facebook. And I want to remind everyone, if they want to see this on their TV, they can go to channel 21 on Spectrum TV, if that's their cable provider, WBNA. We are on at 12:30, 4, and 7 p.m. with a rebroadcast of this show. Okay, for the rest of the show, I'm going to be joined by a guest that I had on previously. I really enjoy talking to him, and he gives me a little bit of perspective from younger listeners, voters, basically politically engaged Gen Z people. And I feel like a lot of the coverage that we have on our program, and this is true for most media, is really targeted towards older people, especially in Fox News. I think the average Fox News listener or Fox News viewer is something like 57 or 58 years old. And ultimately, I want to hear more from young people as well. What are their perspectives on the issues of the day, and how do they see politics progressing? So let me bring on my guest. His name is Casey Allen. He has a show on both YouTube and Rumble, The Casey Allen Show. I encourage you to look that up. So welcome, Casey. How are you?
I'm doing great, Lance. Thanks for being back here. We got a lot to talk about. Happy 4th of July for everyone out there watching. Really hope we can celebrate our country and move forward with victory.
Right, absolutely. Now, Casey's in Northern Kentucky, so that gives us a little bit different perspective there, too, since we're a little more oriented towards Louisville. So the most interesting thing that I've heard recently about Gen Z is apparently the White House, according to their spokesman, feels that Gen Z are lazy. That hasn't been my experience, but let's go ahead and play some video from Karoline Leavitt. She is the White House press secretary. We're supposed to take all of her opinions as essentially the opinions of the president. So let's listen to that real quick.
Generation away from extinction. If these communists are given a chance at power here in Washington, D.C., if they retake the majority in Washington away from the Republicans, we will be heading down a communist takeover. Ask the people of Cuba how that worked out for them. They are begging to come here right now.
Some of these kids, and I call them kids because they're in their 20s, and they've never had real jobs, and they're complaining things are expensive. Yes, things are expensive when you don't have a real job.
That's right.
Do you think that's getting traction, complaining?
Unfortunately, I do, because this generation, my generation, I hate to say it, Gen Z and those younger than me have been raised with just silver spoons in their mouth, just getting everything handed to them. That's not the values this country was built on. It was built on meritocracy and hard work, pulling up your sleeves, pulling yourself up from your bootstraps, and achieving the American dream. And we need to protect it with all we got.
Is it laziness?
A little bit.
Is it because the professor said country's corrupt, it's evil, and we just need to shake them down and hand money out?
It's laziness, and it's the liberal indoctrination. You bring up a great...
Now, I want to basically start off with saying Karoline Leavitt, I think, is 29 years old, maybe 30-year-old herself. She is part of Gen Z. I'm not sure exactly what she considers herself to be a model of incredible work. She's famous because she ran for Congress and lost in a staggering margin in, I think, New Hampshire. She then met a billionaire real estate developer and married into that family. That's basically where her wealth came from. So I'm not sure if I would consider that a model for Gen Z, but it's great work if you can get it. What were your thoughts when you heard that? This was kind of all over the news last week.
Yeah, so a few things said there. I want to start with how I think Jesse Waters kind of addressed, back at Karoline Leavitt, saying that Gen Z isn't working real jobs, so how can they expect to make real money? Well, we're facing one of the hardest times for my generation to land regular jobs. I mean, things like plumbers, a lot of blue-collar jobs, including white-collar. You're seeing with the H-1B visa program that's been maxed out in previous years, and a flow of illegal immigrants under Biden, and the continuation of bringing in legal immigrants, we're making it extremely difficult for Native Americans, heritage Americans, to be able to get a regular job in the workforce, just like their parents and their grandparents had no issue doing. Also having 4 kids, getting married at a young age, and putting a meal on the table for the entire family. So that's an important point, because my generation, not to say that we're lazy, we literally cannot land jobs in this environment. And myself, I'm not talking about myself in particular. I'm an independent guy, but just the average person who is just trying to get ahead. Yeah. Even if you have a college degree, I've seen so many people that have STEM degrees. They're working their asses off, and they end up within their first year out of college, they can't get a job at Macy's. So that to me speaks to a larger issue with the with the immigration and the incentives for companies to bring in H-1B visas and immigrants over the American people. And also, I want to hit on how Caroline Leavitt wants to say that we're a spoon-fed generation. That could be anywhere further from the truth. I mean, Gen Z, not to say that to play the victim card here, but if you look at particularly after 2020, when the money supply was doubled under Joe Biden, they basically during COVID, when they printed all those stimulus checks, they didn't just give us 3 different checks. They actually doubled the money supply from $3.5 trillion existing in circulation, therefore doubling that to $7 trillion. And now we're seeing the effects of that in today's environment 6 years later. But it's very convenient for D.C. and especially the Republicans, and the Democrats will do the same thing when they get in power. It's very easy for them to scapegoat it and blame it on the very people who voted for them, rather than actually addressing the issue itself. So that's how I kind of feel about that one.
Okay. And so here's a little bit of background. I know a lot of our listeners are maybe older generations too. I just want to give some perspective on how this isn't the same country that you grew up in. And these aren't the same conditions going into the workforce and trying to start your own family, buy homes that you had when you were growing up. And I don't want to minimize for our older listeners how difficult some of those situations were. In the 80s, they had interest rates that were double digits. I mean, it was 13, 15% mortgages. So I'm not trying to portray it that no other generation has ever faced struggles. But let me put up a couple graphics that I have to kind of illustrate this point. The first graphic, if we could put this up, producer, relates to the growth in wages versus the growth in productivity. And so can we go back to that? I'll go ahead and just talk over that. No, the last graphic. Yeah, the first graphic that you showed there, producer. Yeah. Okay. So since basically 1970, there has been a dramatic increase in the productivity per worker in our workforce. Essentially, our productivity since 1979, in particular, up to 2025, has almost doubled. Basically, the average worker in America now is producing twice as much as what they were producing in 1979 through technological advancements, differences in the workforces, lots of factors, difference in supply chains, all those things. However, the hourly pay adjusted for inflation is only increased by about 33%. So even though the amount of product of our workers has increased by almost 100%, basically doubled, the increase in the hourly wage over that time has only increased by about 33%. Now, how does that translate? And so if we can go to our next graphic, the result of that and the stagnation of wages and the decoupling between productivity and the wages has resulted, and this is a graphic that shows the real residential property prices in the U.S. from 1970 up until current day. And so the price of a home, the average home, has essentially tripled, adjusted for inflation, between 1970 and modern day. So we see essentially people are making, the hourly worker in America right now is making only about 33% more adjusted for inflation since around this time. And the average cost of a home has increased by about two and a half times. So they're entering a market where everything is extremely expensive relative to their wages, and they're expected to basically pull themselves up by their bootstraps, even though it's a totally different climate. The amount of money that you can make now doesn't correspond to how much everything costs, and in particular housing costs translate to younger people. So let me pick this up after the break with Casey. Come on back, and then we'll start talking about the surveillance state.
to Kentucky's Voice Radio online at kyvoice.org.
Welcome back to Kentucky's Voice. I'm your special host, Dr. Lance Pearson. You're probably listening to us right now on 970 AM WGTK in the Louisville area. Again, you can find us on YouTube or on Facebook at the Kentucky's Voice channel. Just do that search. You can find our full shows from the past in the live tab, or you can go to videos and get just clipped out segments, maybe 10 minutes or even shorts of like a minute or two if you want to see some of our past coverage. In the last segment, we really got into why this is a different economic environment for our young people than it was when a lot of our listeners were young. We showed some graphics earlier that basically discussed that even though our productivity due to all kinds of technological innovations has gone up, there has not been a consistent increase in the amount of wages that people are making. And so the result is things, especially housing, but other, the cost of cars, et cetera, has increased far more than the wages have. So let me go ahead and bring back on Casey Allen. Again, Casey Allen is with the Casey Allen Show. You can find that on YouTube or Rumble. Search for that. So, Casey, you saw the end of that last segment. What are some of your thoughts on why basically wages haven't increased with the cost of all kinds of things that are necessary for live, like rent and or owning a house? So, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I believe it's a few reasons. First of all, we talk about we're outsourcing jobs and Native Americans that would be working these jobs overseas, and that just by definition, by bringing more people into the country, we're going to be getting more things done. Although I do disagree with that sentiment. I think that we should be more of a restrictionist when it comes to immigration. But another reason why we're seeing the amount of production outpace the wage growth is because of really just the currency devaluation. That's another simple way to put it. Mm-hmm. Like I said in the previous segment, and you even saw in the graph, when the year 2020 came, that was a pivotal moment where we basically decided that our currency had basically no more meaning than what it had already meant. When I guess we really founded the currency in general, we had I guess really going off of the dollar is what really kind of destroyed that. But in a sense, we decided that we're not going to actually value the dollar in the future of the American people. We're going to essentially just, the politicians in power, which some of them even aren't 6 years ago, they're going to just use their, power to just make sure that the elites get what they want. And, the American people are going to suffer for that. Right. So that's part of the reason. And also, like, if you look at really the best way to look at how Americans today aren't being treated with at least the same amount of dignity and rewarded the same as their parents and grandparents before them is in just two generations ago. I believe in 1954 was the year. Every American was actually making the equivalent to the worth of an ounce of gold. So every American back then was making, I believe it was like $1,800. It was a decent amount of money. It was actually, might have been less than that, but the equivalent of that over time has been nowhere near it when we went off the gold standard. Basically today, an ounce of gold is $4,500. The average American makes $1,500 every week, whereas you had basically 2 generations ago, you had a 4 times increase or decrease from where we had in my generation, but doing the same amount of work, if that makes any sense. So there's a couple of reasons: currency devaluation, mass immigration, and I think sending money overseas are probably the 3 main issues why we're destroying the future of the workforce, really.
Yeah. All right. Now, I agree with all of those points. One point to make is deflation or inflation is not necessarily bad for everyone. It's bad for people who do not hold assets. So for our older listeners, if during the 2010s, when we really devalued our currency, the Fed was engaging in what we call quantitative easing, what that meant is there was a lot of extra money that was pumped into the system by money printing. That allowed people to buy a lot of stock. That allowed them to buy homes. If you had a home, that's great. A lot of extra money. That means that through inflation, the nominal value of your house went up a lot. If you own stocks, your stocks went up a lot during that period. If you didn't have those things, you fell further and further behind. So your wages did not keep track with all of that inflationary pressure. You've got competition from the entire globe that's driving down your wages. And so it's essentially that inflation helped out people that had a lot of assets. And that can include people like, your grandmother who owns her own home, but it can also include people that are billionaires and they're running hedge funds and they're basically playing the game, buying all those assets and basically allowing the price of those assets to go up and taking the profits off of it. Okay, it's an interesting discussion. We could do an entire show on that, and maybe at some point we will, but let me go ahead and talk about another issue that's passionate to both me and Casey. Again, Casey Allen, find his show on YouTube or on Rumble. And that is the creeping, the encroachment upon our Fourth Amendment rights by the surveillance state. And so what do we mean? In our last segment, if you want to find our old video from 629, go to the YouTube channel, Kentucky's Voice, click on the live tab, and get the last segment where we really talked about basic flock cameras. In the Louisville area, just for perspective, LMPD, Louisville Metro Police Department, operates their own flock cameras. They contract out with Flock Safety, the company, on the order of 240 flock cameras in just this county. They also have smaller municipalities and other providers such that they have access to about 600 flock cameras in just Jefferson County. The surrounding collar counties have been somewhat slower, but I know Oldham has somewhere around 8 of these things. I know Bullitt has expanded them. So this is coming to a community near you, whether you know it or not. Those look like a giant solar panel on top of a camera on the roadside that's basically taking still pictures of your license plate or anyone that drives by those cameras and uploading, what time was it? What was the location? What was the license plate number? I think they actually capture the color of the car. What direction were you driving? All that information is entered into a centralized database that can then be searched. Now, the positive of that is it probably does serve as a useful tool somewhat for our law enforcement officers. Being able to know everyone that drove by a particular location, when they know when a crime occurred, they can kind of limit the full pool of the entire society to just people that we know were in the area at that time. That's the logic for why these should be accepted. The argument against it is we're capturing information on people, 99% of whom have done nothing wrong. It also opens up the ability of the government and bad actors within our government to use that information for nefarious purposes. In particular, I believe there have been somewhere around 20 incidents of police officers being caught tracking down ex-girlfriends or whatever else, basically stalking people online using this technology. So now, there's general support of this among a lot of politicians in both parties, so this isn't a one-party, only one party is responsible for it. In April of this year, Louisville Metro Council voted to not allow the making public of information related to the location of flock cameras in Louisville, and it was an almost unanimous vote. So they basically said, we're going to have flock cameras, and we're not going to let the public know in an easy way where all those are. Now, in order to fill that gap, there are places like DFLOC. If you want to find DEFLOCK, DFLOC is a private organization that basically allows people to detail where all these cameras are. So what are your thoughts in general on flock cameras? And then as we progress, we'll move past these basic cameras to what is coming very soon. And actually, some of these more advanced cameras have started to infiltrate the Louisville area. We'll talk about that as we go forward. What are your thoughts on flock cameras, though, Casey?
Yeah, so it's actually a topic that's it seems to be like it's newly introduced or almost starting to go viral in the past at least 6 months to a year.
Yep.
I've known about flock cameras. I've always been against the surveillance state, and I always saw it as a threat, but I didn't actually see it as the threat that it is until I firstly saw one in person. Actually, during the race with Thomas Massie, which we talked about last time, we were out campaigning. A friend of mine, Doug Chica, who's actually running in Congress in Florida in Matt Gaetz' district, that's his biggest proponent for his campaign is he's trying to get rid of flock cameras and is adamantly against them. And I remember we were driving in my car and we were like in Wilder, Kentucky, I think on the way to Newport. And he was like, stop the car. I was like, why? He's like, there's a flock camera. And I didn't actually know what it looked like. I hadn't actually taken the time to recognize it out of the corner of my eye. And sure enough, I parked off to the side of the road in like this little junkyard and we got out and I made a video on my TikTok. You guys can find it. But yeah, basically, Doug explains exactly what these things are. We illustrate, really explain like with it in the background, kind of showing how it's a real threat. And the scariest thing I think Doug said about that, and what I've really heard is it's not that they can, you know, see the individual cars, license plates, they can, you know, identify very particular features, but they can actually see who's in the car. And there's rumors that they can actually, some of these cameras can identify the exact person in that car. And it basically, that to me is like, I think we're kind of doing the same thing with TSA. We've seen with the Patriot Act, with the FISA bills. Like we're trying to make this surveillance state with the excuse that we're going to help America, when we've seen in the past that it's only made things more dystopian, I think, in my opinion.
Yeah. No, I generally agree. And if the system went no farther than where we were right now with flock cameras, I could live with it. I wouldn't love it, but if we're going to take a still picture of everybody that drives by this public roadway, there's no expectation that nobody can see your license plate when you're out driving. Obviously, the artificial intelligence and the current state of technology allows something that in the past you could have a police officer maybe sitting down with a notepad and writing down every person's license plate number, but it would just be infeasible. It's become feasible, but in principle, that would be it. What I'm most concerned about, and what we'll talk about in our next segment, is what's coming. And so Flock Safety is a company. The current the current models that people are familiar with, which just take the still images, I believe are called Sparrow. They have a new type of camera that's called Condor. And what Condor does is it actually tracks people that are walking by, not just cars on the roadside. It's people that are walking back. They can be set up to essentially be automatic monitors for movement in the area. So it's almost like a motion-activated camera that has a 25x optical zoom. Anybody that walks by a particular area, it will zoom and follow that person and track them on the camera. We'll have some video actually demonstrating what this camera technology can do. But you can see, ultimately, you pair that together with some facial recognition, and you can track the location and have cameras that basically, they're actually called PLZ, pan or PTZ, pan, tilt, and zoom capability, where they are literally zooming in on what you're looking at on your phone. We'll also get into in the next segment a little bit about another company that's a defense contractor called Leonardo that has developed something called signal trace technology. So join us after the break. We'll talk about the dystopia that's coming.
Kentucky's Voice Radio, online at kyvoice.org.
With Flock Safety Chief Communications Officer Josh Thomas.
Reported crimes in America, yeah. So there's a lot more that probably are being helped that aren't being reported. But yes, we have about 700,000 crimes that we are aware of that are being solved in part with evidence that's derived from a Flock Safety device.
In order for that historical data to be of investigative value, you have to track every car for 30 days.
Again, I would challenge you on the word track. Tracking the whole of your movements is very different than knowing that you passed by one specific camera, 24 specific cameras. Those are different things.
And then the examples of tracking that vehicle from location to location to location.
But Flock's own webinars talk about its license plate reader's ability to track vehicles and people.
And we were able to track him all the way over to another state in Kentucky.
And you're able to track your suspect's movements.
You're saying Flock does not track people, correct?
Track people, that's right. And the whole of their movements, like you asked. We're not tracking people.
But what do the Condor cameras do? They literally are designed to track a person, aren't they?
Not to track a person, no.
This is a Flock camera known as a Condor. Unlike the Falcon license plate reader camera, you'll notice this does track the movements of people. Whether or not it was designed to specifically track a person, you can see right now, in real time, no matter which way I move, the camera moves with me.
Okay. All right. We got the last part of that video cut off a little bit, but you got the idea. Ultimately, that was the director of communications for Flock Safety, the company that makes these cameras. That was an example of the Condor models of these Flock cameras and their ability to pan, tilt, zoom, and follow people that come into an area. And it would be a very small extension to put some facial recognition software together with it and basically be able to track you anywhere and everywhere that you go. It also did a nice job of exposing how Flock says that they're not tracking people, but by any reasonable definition, there was tracking there. So, Casey, I hope you were able to hear at least the part of that video we were able to show. What are your thoughts on this next wave of Flock cameras that are going to start appearing, I'm sure, around?
Oh, that sounds even worse.
Yeah.
That sounds absolutely terrible, to be honest. I mean, what we already saw, like with the basic ones, like they have the ability to, I think you even said like they can see what's on your phone, they can identify people. Mm-hmm. That to me is like, if we're going to take this a step further, we're basically getting rid of the Fourth Amendment privacy rights. We're just destroying every sense of what this country was founded on, the founders envisioned. And that was not anywhere near that. I think they viewed government as a necessary evil at the absolute best.
Yeah.
And this is completely antithetical to a nation that's about life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
Yeah.
So if they're going to take this a step further, I mean, I think we're going to know what's going to happen. It's going to be a 1984 Orwellian surveillance state.
That's right.
We think it's bad now. Just imagine being like China, where you literally cannot even walk a single inch in public without being fully surveilled by some sort of government entity or a private figure that is using their surveillance tools to. I mean, you have many. You have actual government contracted ones. You have even the United States. You've got Palantir. You've got so many different organizations that are like a big kind of spider web of honestly really scary things to come. And that's where I'm. I'll use my platform and I'll help candidates who will go against Flock safety cameras. I think that I do understand the appeal, especially with today's technology. You want to be on top of the world. You want to be better than China. You want to have the cool stuff. But using this against the American people is not going to help us out. I think we've seen the precedents in the past. Every time government tries to lend a hand and say they're going to help it always ends up backfiring. It makes it 2 to 10 times worse. And these like temporary programs that we kind of bring in for like a temporary safety census, they end up going away, or they end up staying permanent.
Right.
And 100 years later, they become even more powerful. So I'm completely against this, the Flock safety stuff. Whether it's just the basic ones or more the advanced ones.
Yeah.
I'd say similar to the AI data centers. I think we have to put a stop to this.
Yeah. Now, another concern, again, if it was just the cameras and they weren't everywhere, apparently LMPD has access to 600 of these just in Jefferson County, which to me was incredible. But if it just stopped there, fine. Like I can deal with the concept. The problem is when you put in all this infrastructure of all the flock cameras, now it's so easy to have scope creep. Now, what if flock camera, they want to add a microphone now? And so now they're recording any conversations that are happening in the vicinity of their camera. We just saw the Condor model where they're actually actively tracking and identifying people and what the person is doing at all times. So that, to me, that's a significant escalation that I don't love. Now,
and I might add that I actually am concerned with something else that could be used with this power. I mean, let's say this is in the hands of the U.S. government, the authoritarian regime we have now. It's like, that could be very well used to frame crimes. I mean, you think about things like AI, flock safety, like you're putting that much power into these overlords. Like, could they use this in a disingenuous, fabricated way to go against their enemies? I mean, I don't think something like that's off the table, whether it's the left or the right. I think with these new powers, you could possibly see some fabrication of reality as we know it.
Yeah, it certainly gives them an enormous amount of power, and absolute power corrupts absolutely, I believe is the statement. So I can see that. Now let me transition over into another way that the powers here can be extended. There is a defense contractor by the name of Leonardo. That's the name of the company, Leonardo. They have their own version of these types of cameras, much like Flock, but their cameras, they have introduced a patent for what they call signal trace technology. And those signal trace technology sensors essentially are able to pick up on anything that is radio frequency based and catalog the information from that. And if you don't know all the objects in your life that send out radio frequency signals, let me go ahead and bring up a graphic of all of the things that they have filed a patent to be able to track with the sensors that they put with their cameras. Okay, so you can see there your mobile phones, they are able to read anything that's connected with Bluetooth. They're able to identify essentially what the device is and who's using it. Wearables like your watch or your fitness tracker, your wireless headphones, tire sensor, tire pressure sensors, security and safety sensors, your infotainment systems, laptops, your tablets, your vehicle hotspot. If they have a Wi-Fi hotspot attached to your vehicle, they can identify essentially who is using that, the geolocation of that information. And then think about all the cards that you have in your wallet. All right, most of those communicate with RFID as well. So everything from your work badge that you use to swipe in. Many people, when they go to pay for their groceries, they'll just tap their card on the surface of the reader. They don't actually even have to swipe the magnetic strip anymore or use the chip in there. The chip is sending out a radio frequency ID that is being picked up by that sensor. So they can essentially get all of the banking information that is contained in your credit cards with sensors attached to these things. So now, if we could drop that now. So so you get a sense that the next generation of these devices are going to integrate your still cameras with active scanning, facial identification, and the ability to pair them with other sensors that will track not only that a car with a certain license plate drove by the thing, but what wearables did they have on? What cell phone were they using? Did they have a laptop in their car? All the information that is being sent out by the credit cards that they've got in their pocket. You can just see the tech that is available right now and is only one approval by some legislative chamber from being gradually integrated into your life. And they've already got all the Flock safety camera infrastructure right there. They've already got the pole. They've already got the camera. All they got to do is add another sensor, work out Leonardo getting to work with Flock Safety or Flock Safety buying out Leonardo. We're basically this is just an enhancement of the features away from having a literal surveillance state that is far worse, I would say, than even what China is doing right now. Because in China, like, there's some significant limitations in their society because it is a closed society. Like, people are already on the lookout. In America, we go about our lives thinking that we have all these freedoms, that we're not constantly being tracked. And so people have all kinds of data and information that's available that they're just putting out there because there isn't the same level of alert. If I'm living in China, I'm already going to have my antennas up. I need to be really careful because I could be watched at any time. That isn't the way our society should work, and it isn't the way people function. And this technology can take advantage of that. Do you have any thoughts on that, Casey?
Yeah, it's actually even scarier than that, because it's not that they're just surveilling us and they're collecting all this data. In reality, they can't sift through all this information within a 4-year period. Like, the bureaucracy isn't capable of doing that with that amount of time frame.
Yep.
So what they'll do, the next step is they'll actually contract with, a company that is contracted with 12 government agencies, known as Palantir, run by Peter Thiel. They're a data analytics company, and they're able to sift through all this data in a very short amount of time. And these things is what they've even said to themselves. They think it's going to lead to quote unquote pre-crime. So their idea is to not only catch people who have committed crimes, but they're trying to make preventable actions to make sure they can catch people who basically haven't even carried them out yet.
Absolutely.
So this is like extremely scary, and like we're only in like the beginning stage, I think, because now they're finally organized. They're getting the data in sync. They're doing it in a timely manner. So with you have the Flock Safety coupled with Palantir, with all these other organizations we're talking about here. That itself, I think that could be one of the greatest threats to our existence as a nation. And the fact that we even have politicians that will take money and go behind these and support this, I think that's completely treasonous to a point. I mean, as much as they're taking away.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, we've only really scratched the surface. We're talking about sensors being out in public and what is being read. We haven't even talked about probably the biggest invasion of our privacy, and it's all of these tech apps that you have on your phone, on your computer, that you are feeding. Every detail of your life is available to these companies, and these companies are free, in most cases, to share that information with the federal government. Now, I do want to call attention to one Supreme Court case that came out this last week that was at least somewhat promising. There's the Chaudhry case, if you want to look it up. It related to geofencing information, where Google was asked by the government to identify the cell phone location of everyone around certain crimes, and they opposed it. Ultimately, the Supreme Court struck that down. All right,